Before diving into the video, did you know that over 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed? Your one like and one subscribe means the absolute world to this channel and helps us keep going. Hit those buttons real quick and let's get into the video. Prologue. The solitary birthday. Sir, would you like me to light the candles for you? The young woman was dressed in the restaurant's crisp black vest uniform, holding a lighter in her hand as she stood quietly beside my table, her voice gentle and soft. I responded without looking up, my eyes still fixed on the glowing screen of my phone. The last message in the chat window was from Elena. Julian, something came up at the last minute. Go ahead and celebrate your birthday on your own tonight. Marcus isn't doing too well right now, so I'm going to stay with him for a while. I'll make it up to you when I get back. Timestamp. 9:17 p.m. Sent just 3 minutes ago. The waitress placed the candles into the small cake and gently reminded me, Sir, the candles are almost burned down. Only then did I snap back to reality. I glanced down at the frosted number on the cake. 28. It felt utterly ironic. I stared at the two tiny flickering flames and let out a sudden, dry laugh. Tell me, I asked her, does celebrating your birthday all by yourself even count as celebrating? She was visibly caught off guard, clearly not expecting me to strike up a conversation. After a 2-second pause, she answered sincerely, Of course it counts. A birthday is something you celebrate for yourself. I nodded slowly without uttering a word. She glanced at the empty seat set across from me and asked with genuine care, Would you like me to sing happy birthday for you? It's free, she added quickly with an awkward, warm smile. That made me laugh. I waved my hand. No need. Just do me one favor. Sure. What is it? If I forget to blow out the candles later, remind me. She nodded politely. Okay. I looked back at my phone screen and replied to Elena with a single, detached word. Okay. Then I switched off the screen and sat in silence before a table laden with dishes that had already gone completely cold. For the very first time, I looked inward and seriously confronted a question I had avoided for years. What exactly am I still holding on to in this relationship? Chapter 1. The first priority. I had been with Elena for 4 full years. Throughout those 4 years, the single sentence she uttered to me most often was, Don't overthink it, Marcus is just a childhood friend. She said it so effortlessly, so naturally, that it had become her default catchphrase. So ingrained that later on, whenever those exact words left her mouth, my stomach would instinctively tighten in reflex. Marcus had been her classmate in elementary school, her desk mate in middle school, in the adjacent classroom through high school, and had then gone overseas for his university studies. In short, he had occupied almost the entire first half of her life. I will admit that at the beginning I genuinely did not mind. After all, who doesn't have a close friend they grew up with? The real issue was something else entirely. How should the priority between an old friend and a romantic partner be ranked? The day Marcus returned to the country, rain was pouring from the sky in dense, relentless sheets. Elena and I were sitting together in the back seat of a car. The windshield wipers swept back and forth furiously, yet the glass remained blurred by the storm. Her phone rang. She glanced down at the caller ID, and her eyes instantly lit up with radiant warmth. Hello, Marcus. You've landed? Stay right where you are. I'm coming to pick you up right now. After hanging up the call, she turned to me, her tone dropping into an unusually gentle, persuasive cadence. Julian, could you step out and take a taxi home? Marcus's situation is urgent. He has a mountain of luggage and doesn't know this part of the city well. The driver glanced back at me through the rearview mirror, his expression visibly embarrassed on my behalf. I looked at Elena for 2 quiet seconds, gave a slight nod, and said, Sure. She froze for a moment, surprised that I had agreed without a single protest. You're not upset? Didn't you just say his situation was urgent? The car pulled over against the curb. I pushed open the door and stepped outside. The heavy rain slammed directly into my face, soaking my shirt through in less than 3 seconds flat. Elena rolled down the passenger window halfway and called out, Don't overthink it. I'll call you the moment I'm done. I offered a faint smile. Okay, go take care of it. The car sped away, splashing puddle water onto the pavement. I stood by the roadside as rain poured down around me like buckets dumped from the heavens. Across the road, a neon sign flickered. 24-hour noodle house. Without hesitation, I crossed over, drenched to the bone. Just as a steaming bowl of beef noodles was set before me, my phone screen lit up. Elena had texted, Did you make it home? Don't catch a cold from the rain. I stared at the text and found myself completely unsure of how to respond. In the end, I typed out a single word, home. She immediately replied, Good. Followed by a cheerful smiling sun emoji. I stared at that bright, smiling icon and suddenly felt the overwhelming absurdity of the situation. You see, it was never that she didn't care about me at all. It was simply that she would always prioritize Marcus first and remember to check on me only afterward. From that day onward, this dynamic began to feel alarmingly routine. Julian, Marcus just rented an apartment. Can you go over and help him configure his network router? Julian, you're skilled with presentation decks. Can you review his slides for his upcoming pitch? At first, I would push back and ask, why can't he handle it himself? Or why don't you help him? Eventually, I stopped asking altogether because her answer was always identical. I'm swamped right now, and you're passing by that neighborhood anyway, aren't you? What's wrong with lending a helping hand? The most exhausting part was that whenever she made these demands, she genuinely believed there was nothing wrong with them. At times, I felt like nothing more than a convenient utility whose presence only served to make things easier and more exciting for the two of them. Chapter 2. The Cold Reality. On the night of my 28th birthday, Elena had explicitly promised she would leave work early by 6 p.m. I had reserved the private table 2 days in advance, deliberately selecting dishes she loved and ordering a low-sugar cake from her favorite bakery so it wouldn't feel heavy if eaten late in the evening. At 5:40 p.m., she sent a text, almost finished at work. At 6:20 p.m., something popped up last minute. Go ahead and start eating first. At 7:05 p.m., Marcus is in a terrible mood today. I'm going to check on him. It should be quick. At 8:11 p.m., Julian, eat without me. Don't wait around. At 9:17 p.m., I'll make it up to you when I get home. Be good. Sir, would you like me to light the candles now? The young waitress in the black vest uniform stood quietly beside my table, holding the lighter. I looked at the unlit cake and nodded. She lingered for a brief moment, noticing that I still hadn't made a move to blow them out, and whispered, Sir, the candles are about to melt down completely. I let out a soft murmur, still sitting motionless. She hesitated, then suggested gently, Would you like me to help you blow them out? Otherwise, the wax will drip directly onto the frosting. I lifted my head and looked into her eyes. They were clear, calm, and free of any intrusive pity or judgment. She was simply asking an honest, practical question. I gave a small smile. Could you? She nodded. Yes. Make a wish first. I closed my eyes for half a second, made no wish whatsoever, and opened them. Go ahead. She leaned forward and gently blew. The small flames flickered and died. In the background, laughter echoed from nearby tables, glasses clinked, and faint strains of a celebratory birthday song spilled from an adjacent private dining room. She lifted the candles away onto her tray and whispered, Happy birthday. I looked at her and said with genuine appreciation, Thank you. As she turned to leave, I called her back. Wait a moment. Yes, sir? I pushed the untouched second main dish toward her. I can't finish this food. Could you pack it up into a takeout container for me? Of course. And cut the cake cleanly in half. If the staff in your kitchen doesn't mind, please share the other half among yourselves. She looked slightly surprised. Are you sure? I nodded firmly. Yes, I'm sure. By 10:30 p.m., I carried the takeout boxes into my apartment. When I opened the front door, the living room was dark. Only the bedroom lamp cast a sliver of light across the floor. Elena was sitting on the edge of the mattress, wiping off her makeup with a cotton pad. Without even turning around, she said, You're back? I just got out of the shower. I made a quiet sound of acknowledgement and set the takeout boxes on the dining table. Noticing the bakery box, her voice softened slightly into an appeasing tone. Oh, you're genuinely upset? I told you I'd make it up to you. Marcus was in an awful state today. I couldn't just leave him stranded, right? I looked at her with complete calm. If he isn't feeling well, you go spend time with him. What about my birthday? When exactly were you planning to spend time with me? She frowned, tossing the cotton pad onto the vanity. What is that supposed to mean? It means exactly what the words say. Julian, don't drag this out into an argument. I already explained everything. I nodded flatly. Right. You explained. Her voice sharpened in irritation. Why have you become so sarcastic lately? Marcus is just a friend. Is it really that entertaining for you to obsess over him every single day? I said nothing, turned around, and walked into the kitchen to pour a glass of water. Her voice followed me from the doorway. You were never like this before. You're genuinely exhausting me right now. Holding my glass, I glanced back at her and smiled faintly. All right then, get some sleep. She froze in place. That's your whole reaction? What kind of reaction were you looking for? At least say something meaningful. If I say it, will you actually listen? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I grabbed my laptop and charging cable from the bedroom, walked into the study, and shut the door firmly behind me. The moment the latch clicked shut, I heard her mutter quietly in the hall. Crazy. I sat in the study chair, staring blankly at the dark screen for 5 minutes before opening WeChat and messaging my acquaintance Vincent. The smart control project you brought up last time, I'm in. Let's schedule a time to meet in person tomorrow. His reply arrived almost instantaneously. Bro, you finally came around. I stared at the reply and sent back a single confirmation. Chapter 3. The Quiet Shift. Over the course of the following week, Elena distinctly sensed that something had fundamentally shifted within me. Previously, if she returned late at night, I would ask where she had been and why she was delayed. Now, I merely glanced up and said, "Leave your shoes by the entryway so you don't trip in the dark." Previously, whenever she mentioned that Marcus had called her for help, my brow would furrow in irritation. Now I simply said, "Go ahead, be careful on the road." This sudden absence of friction began to make her deeply uneasy. One morning, she stood blocking the kitchen doorway, staring at me directly. "Julian, are you angry with me?" I was standing by the stove, flipping fried eggs. "No. Then why have you been treating me so coldly lately?" "Have I? Can't you feel it yourself?" I flipped the eggs, lowered the gas burner, and kept my tone utterly neutral. "Haven't you always complained that I meddle too much in your life? Now that I'm not meddling, isn't this exactly what you wanted?" She choked on her words, glaring at me in disbelief. "Do you think this is a joke?" I plated the eggs neatly and offered the dish to her. "Eat while it's warm. Cold eggs taste unpleasant." She refused to take the plate, her voice rising sharply. "What is it that you actually want?" I gave a slight smile. "Elena, I don't want anything. You live your life, and I'll live mine." She slammed the plate down onto the counter. "Fine. Keep putting on an act then." That evening, a text arrived from her. "Marcus invited me out to dinner tonight. I might be back late." I replied, "Okay." 10 minutes later, she texted back, "Just an okay?" I saw the notification, but chose not to reply. Half an hour later, my phone rang with an incoming call from her. "What is that supposed to mean?" she demanded the second I picked up. "What does what mean? I went out of my way to give you a heads up about my plans, and this is the attitude I get?" I leaned back against the window frame, looking at the distant city traffic lights below. "What kind of attitude were you expecting? At the very least, ask me who else is coming, where we're dining, and what time I'll be home. Haven't you already made up your mind to go?" Would asking any of those questions change a single thing? The line went dead silent for 2 seconds before her voice turned cold and rigid. "Julian, you are acting completely bizarre right now." I replied softly. "Perhaps." Chapter 4. The Final Boundary. 3 days later, an upscale industry networking cocktail mixer took place. Elena insisted that I accompany her, claiming that it would look bad if her partner failed to show up, so I attended. During the introductory segment, the event host invited her on stage to introduce the companions accompanying her. She looked toward Marcus first, her smile instantly beaming and radiant. "This is Marcus, a dear friend I've known since childhood. We'll be collaborating closely on several major ventures moving forward." Only after the applause died down did she casually turn toward me, her smile noticeably dimming into a polite, flat expression. "And this is my boyfriend, Julian. He's generally quite low-key and stays completely uninvolved in commercial business matters." The audience clapped politely, and I overheard someone in the back row murmur an understanding "Ah, got it." I kept my composure and said nothing. When it came time for the formal toasts, Marcus stepped forward and clapped a heavy hand onto my shoulder. "Julian, Elena doesn't have a high tolerance for alcohol. Why don't you step in and drink this toast on her behalf?" I reached up, calmly lifted his hand off my shoulder, and smiled evenly. "Wouldn't it make far more sense for you to drink it? After all, aren't you two the lifelong childhood friends?" The surrounding air froze instantly into awkward silence. Elena's face darkened on the spot. She grabbed my sleeve tightly and hissed under her breath, "Stop making a scene in public." I looked down at her grip and deliberately, slowly pulled my sleeve out of her fingers. "I'm not making a scene. I just suddenly realized you were entirely correct." "Correct about what?" "I truly do not belong in your business world." Leaving those words behind, I set my glass down on the cocktail table and walked out of the banquet hall. The moment I reached the parking garage, my phone vibrated with an incoming call from Elena. I answered. and her furious voice came blasting through the speaker. Julian, have you had enough of this childish nonsense? I didn't cause a scene, yet you went out of your way to humiliate me in front of everyone today. I smiled into the phone. Did I? I assumed you were thoroughly accustomed to public dynamics like that. What are you talking about? When you introduced Marcus, your eyes sparkled. When you introduced me, your tone sounded like you were reading a legal disclaimer. Elena, have you truly never noticed the problem? The call went quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was even harsher. Marcus is just a childhood friend. How many hundreds of times do I have to drill that into your head? Staring at my own reflection in the car window, I answered quietly. You can say it 10,000 times if you like. But what you say with your mouth is one thing. What you demonstrate with your actions is another. She let out a bitter, cold laugh. Wow. Now you're standing on a high horse giving me lectures. This isn't a lecture. It's a boundary. Then break up with me if you got the guts. The exact second those words left her mouth, every lingering trace of hesitation in my heart vanished completely. I nodded calmly. Okay. Her voice cracked in sheer disbelief. You heard me. I hung up the phone immediately. Then I typed out a clear, final text. Elena, we're broken up. I will pack up all the personal belongings you left at my apartment this coming weekend. Leave your spare key with the building property management office, and do not come knocking on my door late at night anymore. After hitting send, I set my phone to silent, turned the ignition, and drove away. As the headlights illuminated the road, I suddenly remembered the words the young waitress had whispered after blowing out the birthday candle days earlier. Happy birthday. It was strange. She had spoken only 2 simple words, yet they felt more sincere and grounded than nearly anything I had heard across my entire 4-year relationship. I assumed the matter was settled, but at noon the following day, my apartment doorbell rang persistently. When I opened the door, Elena was standing on the threshold with bloodshot, puffy eyes, holding a cup of takeout coffee from my favorite cafe. Her opening words were neither an apology nor an invitation to talk. Instead, she demanded, Julian, are you genuinely breaking up with me? Behind me, the kitchen timer chimed. The soup simmering on the stove had just reached a boil. I turned, switched off the burner, turned back to face her, and said a single word. Yes. Elena stood frozen. The coffee cup in her hands was still steaming, condensation dripping along its lid. I checked my watch. 12:08 p.m. I had an investor meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. Come in and say what you need to say, I said, stepping aside. Upon entering, the first thing she did was place the coffee cup onto the armchair where I normally sat. The second thing she did was walk straight into the kitchen, opening cabinets with total familiarity to retrieve a glass. I didn't stop her. After drinking some water, she turned to confront me. Are you really ending 4 years over Marcus? Yes, I replied, looking straight at her. Because whenever you and Marcus are in the same room, I am always treated like the backup option. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her tone softening slightly. I admit I may have crossed the line recently, but you can't just throw an entire relationship away out of nowhere. I nodded. Yes, I can. Her anger flared instantly. Julian, you are unbelievable. For whole years together, and you discard it without a second thought? I smiled faintly. Aren't you doing the exact same thing? For whole years together, and you never hesitated to cast me aside. That silenced her entirely. She stood speechless for a long while. I picked up a manila envelope from the console and pushed it across the table. Your spare apartment key, your access card, and the earring you left behind last time are all inside. I will box up your remaining clothes and cosmetics this weekend. She stared at the envelope, her eyes reddening with tears. You had all of this prepared already? Yes. You've been plotting to break up with me for a long time, haven't you? My voice remained entirely composed. You simply gave me plenty of opportunities to think it through. Gritting her teeth, she snatched the envelope, turned, and headed for the exit. At the doorway, she glared back over her shoulder. Julian, don't you dare come regretting this later. I nodded calmly. I won't. The door slammed shut with a heavy thud. I stood quietly for a few moments, walked over to the armchair, picked up the cooling cup of coffee she had brought, and poured it directly down the kitchen sink. Chapter 5. Severing Ties. Elena was convinced I was simply throwing an emotional tantrum. During the first week following our breakup, she messaged me relentlessly every day. Have you eaten yet? The temperature dropped sharply today. Make sure to bundle up. I bought that specialty cake from your favorite bakery and left it outside your front door. I did not respond to a single message. During the second week, She switched her approach to familial pressure. My mother asked why you haven't come over for Sunday dinner. You're acting completely immature right now. Can we please handle this like rational adults? I still gave no reply. By the third week, she bypassed messaging and called my phone directly. I answered the call. Her opening words were filled with exasperation. How much longer do you plan to keep this up? I was at my desk reviewing a project proposal, my eyes never shifting from the monitor. I'm not keeping anything up. You ignore all my texts and refuse to pick up my calls. If that isn't throwing a childish tantrum, what do you call it? It's called cutting ties. Her voice instantly spiked in pitch. Julian, do you really have to be this cold and heartless? I stopped typing and leaned back in my chair. Elena, ceasing contact after a breakup is called basic common sense, not being heartless. A tense silence hung over the phone before she declared sharply. Fine. Then let's meet in person one last time to clear the air once and for all. There is no need. There is, she demanded. If you refuse to show up, I'll come straight to your office building to find you. I paused for a brief moment. 7 p.m. tonight. The usual place? Fine. The usual place was the very same restaurant where I had spent my birthday alone. I arrived promptly at 7 p.m. Elena walked through the entrance at 7:20 p.m., sitting down across from me. Her first words were, "About what happened on your birthday? I'm sorry." I offered a simple, non-committal, waiting for her to continue. Unsettled by my total lack of emotion, she panicked and rushed to justify herself. I truly didn't intend to stand you up. Marcus was going through an absolute crisis that evening. Her voice wavered. Can't you just give me one more chance? Before I could even reply, her phone on the table began buzzing loudly. Caller ID, Marcus. She glanced nervously at me and swiped to decline the call. 3 seconds later, the phone buzzed again. She declined it a second time. When it buzzed for the third consecutive time, she stood up abruptly from the table. I need to step outside and take this quickly. I'll be right back. I smiled faintly. Go ahead. I promise I'll be right back. And she turned and hurried out the front doors. Watching her retreating figure, I felt an overwhelming sense of emptiness. No anger, no grief, just complete indifference. I raised my hand to signal the server. It was the very same young woman from my birthday. Her name tag read Serafina. When she reached my table, she paused in surprise before asking softly, Sir, dining alone again tonight? I nodded slightly. Not originally, but shortly. She understood immediately, asking no prying questions. Would you like to place an order first? No. Just bring me the bill, please. She looked puzzled. But you haven't ordered any food yet. Consider it a table reservation fee. She lowered her head, punched the register, and handed me the printed receipt. All settled. I took the receipt and stood up to leave just as Elena hurried back inside. Seeing me walking toward the exit, panic washed over her face. Where are you going? Home. Didn't I tell you I'd be right back? You did come back, I said, meeting her eyes. But I have already moved on. She froze in the middle of the aisle, her eyes welling with tears. I didn't pause for another second. I pushed open the glass doors and stepped out into the evening air. Chapter 6. The First Layer of Truth. Following that encounter, I assumed she would finally back off, but she did not. The very next morning, she sent a lengthy paragraph. Marcus had an urgent emergency yesterday. I truly did not mean to disrupt our conversation. Can you please stop assuming the worst of every situation? I've known him since childhood. I cannot simply turn a blind eye when he is in trouble. But that does not mean I don't care about you. I read the text and sent back a concise reply. Good to hear he is all right. She replied instantly. Can you stop being so relentlessly passive-aggressive? I chose not to respond further. Meanwhile, my new venture was gaining serious momentum. Vincent brought me to meet an institutional angel investor. We pitched for 3 hours straight and finalized a preliminary term sheet on the spot. Leaving the conference room, Vincent slapped my shoulder with an enormous grin. Man, you bounced back with incredible focus. I smiled. Life taught me an expensive lesson. My head is completely clear now. They say failure in romance leads to triumphs in business. When did you get so sharp? He laughed heartily. Come on, let's go out and celebrate tonight. I shook my head. Not tonight. I still have a commercial contract to review. You never used to be such a workaholic. The past is in the past. That evening, as I sat at home analyzing contract clauses, Elena's name flashed on my phone repeatedly. I declined the first call. She rang back immediately. I declined again. When she called for the third consecutive time, I picked up simply to stop the harassment. Speak. Hearing me answer, her tone immediately softened. Julian, I know you're still carrying anger. How about this? I'll completely power down my phone this entire weekend, see nobody else, and dedicate every minute solely to you. Okay. I flipped a page of the contract. No need. Why not? Because we are broken up. She fell silent for several seconds before throwing out an accusation. Is there someone else? I let out an exasperated chuckle. Your leaps in logic are truly remarkable. Then why have you turned into an entirely different person so fast? I didn't change fast. I simply woke up late. She tried to argue further, but an incoming call from Vincent interrupted. I have an incoming business call, I stated flatly. Vincent? You're busy with work? She asked, surprised. What kind of project are you even working on? My own affairs. You used to despise corporate networking and business socializing. People change. I disconnected the call without waiting for a reply. 3 days later, I walked into a quiet cafe to meet a prospective client. While placing my order at the counter, a voice called out, Mr. Julian? I turned around. It was Serafina. She wasn't wearing her restaurant uniform, just a simple white button-down shirt and jeans, working diligently on a laptop with spreadsheets open. What a coincidence, I remarked. She offered a warm smile. I work the day shift here as a barista. Would you like a latte or an Americano? You remember? On your birthday, you ordered an Americano with no sugar. I nodded with a smile. Then the usual please. While brewing the espresso, she asked casually, How have things been going lately? Pretty well, I replied. That's wonderful to hear. Her words were simple, yet they felt remarkably grounding. No hidden motives, no prying questions, and no underlying emotional baggage. Just as I took my coffee cup, my phone lit up with a message from Elena. Where are you? I'm waiting downstairs in the lobby of your office building. I replied, I am not there. She immediately sent an audio message, her voice tight with barely suppressed anger. Are you deliberately dodging me? I paused, typed out a reply, and sent it. I am not dodging you. I simply have no desire to see you. I placed the phone face down on the table and continued my business discussion uninterrupted. Chapter 7. The Loan Scheme. At 11 p.m. that night, as I drove back to my residential complex, I spotted Elena's car idling near the gated entrance. She was sitting in the driver's seat with the headlights turned off. As I walked past on foot, she rolled down her window. Julian, come over for 2 minutes. I need to tell you something. I stopped a few paces away and looked at her. She bit her lip, hesitating before speaking. Marcus asked me today if you were still throwing your tantrum. I said nothing. She continued. I told him you were just temporarily upset and that it would pass soon. I looked at her, feeling a dark amusement rising within me. Elena, do you genuinely still believe I am throwing a tantrum? She frowned. If it's not a tantrum, then what is it? For years together, and you think you can just erase it overnight? That's impossible. It is entirely possible. I don't believe you. Then feel free to keep disbelieving. I turned to walk toward the gate. Panicking, she threw open her car door, rushed forward, and grabbed my wrist. Julian, stop doing this. I have been under immense exhaustion lately. I looked down at her fingers gripping my arm and peeled them away one by one. Your exhaustion is your own responsibility. It is not a justification for me to turn back. Her eyes brimmed with tears of frustration. Why have you become so vicious with your words? You were never this cold before. I wasn't cold before, and you treated me like an absolute doormat. She opened her mouth, completely stunned into silence. I tapped my access card against the gate scanner and walked inside. As the elevator doors closed on the ground floor, I could see her through the glass foyer, standing alone in the dark, her face painted with a mixture of anger, hurt, and unacknowledged panic. The following day at noon, a brief message arrived from her. Julian, I have one final favor to ask. Help me this one last time, and I swear I will never bother you again. I stared at the words one last time for several seconds before replying. What favor? She sent a voice note. Her tone was gentle and coaxing, but the contents chilled me to the bone. Marcus is preparing to purchase a home, but his personal bank statements and credit history aren't quite qualifying for the mortgage. Could you agree to a fake reconciliation with me for a single month so we can use your financial records to co-sign and secure his loan approval? I listened to the voice note twice. The sunlight outside was blazing, yet a bitter cold settled over me. The true underlying motive had finally surfaced. I stared at the screen for 10 seconds, then sent a text. 8 p.m. tonight. The coffee shop across from my building. Bring Marcus with you, she replied instantly. Okay. Promptly at 8 p.m., I walked into the cafe. Elena and Marcus were already seated side by side at a corner table with 2 beverages. The moment I sat down, Marcus flashed a broad, familiar grin. Julian, I really appreciate you stepping up for this. It's genuinely just an administrative formality. At most 30 days. Once the bank clears the underwriting, your name gets detached immediately. I nodded slowly. Lay out the exact procedural plan. Elena chimed in eagerly. We just temporarily update our relationship status in the bank's profile to an established long-term partnership, then submit your audited personal cash flow records as joint proof of repayment capability. The moment the title deed is approved, we dissolve the status. I offered a cold smile. And you described this as a fake reconciliation? Yes, Elena said, looking perfectly composed. We aren't actually getting back together. It's purely on paper for the banking system. Whose name is being registered on the property deed? Marcus answered smoothly. Elena's name will be on the deed initially. We'll finalize the split later. Who is funding the down payment? I'll cover a portion up front, and Elena will cover the remainder, Marcus said. And who is responsible for servicing the monthly mortgage payments? Marcus hesitated for a fraction of a second. Well, we'll figure out the allocation as we go. I leaned back into my chair, studying the 2 of them. Understood. It can be done, but exclusively under my terms. Elena's face brightened with excitement. You agree? Do not celebrate prematurely. Hear my conditions first. I held up 3 fingers. First, a legally binding tripartite agreement executed between you, Elena, and myself. It must explicitly state that I am merely providing temporary verification, that I hold 0 ownership or equity, and that I assume absolute 0 liability for loan repayment. Second, a notarized indemnity clause stating that if any mortgage payment is overdue by more than 15 days, you 2 jointly assume total liability for all direct and indirect financial harm, including credit score damages, regulatory penalties, and all associated legal fees. Third, a cash security deposit. Marcus will deposit $200,000 up front into an independent third-party escrow account. Not for my personal use, but to guarantee that neither of you defaults on these obligations. The entire table went dead silent. Marcus forced a stiff, uncomfortable laugh. Julian, come on, man. We're all close friends here. Do we really need to make things this adversarial and ugly? Friends. I looked directly into his eyes. You are asking me to put my entire financial credibility on the line to buy your house. And you dare call us friends? Elena scowled, her voice hardening with indignation. Julian, aren't you blowing this completely out of proportion? We are literally just borrowing your financial profile for 4 weeks. What is the point of demanding all these ridiculous legal contracts? She glared at me, cornered. Can you stop being so petty and calculating for once in your life? I nodded calmly. Fine. Then I won't be calculating. Find someone else to co-sign. I stood up to leave. Elena immediately lunged across the table and grabbed my sleeve. Don't walk away. Let's talk this through reasonably. I pulled my arm free. I just laid out the only reasonable terms. If you refuse to play by legal rules, the conversation is over. Marcus let out an irritated sigh. Fine. Let me think it over. I glanced at my watch and walked out into the street. Behind me, I heard Elena whisper in frustration. Why can't you just be a little softer? I didn't turn back. Chapter 8. Contract over feelings. The following afternoon, Elena sent a digital document labeled Simplified Loan Cooperation Agreement. I opened the file and read through the clauses. The entire multi-page document could essentially be condensed into a single core premise. Party A, Julian, voluntarily provides credit assistance and waives all subsequent rights of indemnification and recovery against Party B and Party C. I laughed out loud in sheer disbelief. This wasn't a simplification. This was an explicit attempt to trick me into voluntarily jumping into a financial abyss. I immediately forwarded the PDF to Serafina. We had exchanged contact details after crossing paths several times at the cafe. Could you take a look at this when you have a moment? Her response arrived within minutes. Looking at it now. Who drafted this? It looks like a haphazard collection of generic online contract templates stitched together. There are critical liability risks on almost every single page. I typed back. The other party wants me to sign an indentured servitude contract. She sent back an exclamation mark. Barely 5 minutes later, she sent over a structured, professional breakdown highlighting every dangerous clause, accompanied by red-line revisions. At the bottom of the notes, she added, If you sign something like this out of soft-hearted guilt, it will destroy you financially down the road. Lending someone a hand is one thing. Drowning yourself in unpayable debt for them is madness. I stared at her note and replied, "Understood, Attorney Serafina." She sent back a laughing emoji, just a side skill set from my operations background. Don't flatter me. That evening, I forwarded Serafina's redlined agreement directly to Elena. Her phone call came through almost instantly, her voice trembling with anxiety. "Julian, what is the meaning of this? Why did you bring an actual legal professional into this?" "I didn't bring a lawyer. I brought basic common sense. These revised clauses are absurdly strict. Marcus will never agree to sign something this harsh. Then he is completely free to decline. Are you deliberately trying to sabotage him?" "No. I am managing legal and financial risk. You approached me for assistance, and I provided the only legally acceptable framework. Whether you accept it or walk away is entirely your decision." She went quiet for several moments before attempting to wheedle. "Could you just do me a personal favor and sign the bank papers first? We can hammer out the private contract afterward." My tone remained flat and unyielding. "Elena, you no longer possess the privilege of asking me to sign first and talk later." The phone remained silent for a long time before she spat out a final line. "You have become unrecognizable." Then she severed the connection. Chapter 9. The Bank Walkout. 3 days later, Elena sent a calendar invite. Thursday, 10 a.m. South City Bank Branch. "Please come, Julian. I am begging you." I attended the appointment. Not because my resolve had softened, but because I wanted to witness firsthand how far their audacity would stretch. Inside the bank's private consultation suite, the commercial loan officer laid out the underwriting paperwork across the mahogany table. I turned to the specific page marked joint and several borrower liability. Before I could speak, Marcus leaned across the table with an easy smile. "Julian, let's just proceed with the standard bank paperwork today. We can skip that tripartite side agreement, right? It feels way too formal and rigid between close friends." I lifted my eyes and looked at him. When did I ever agree to waive the tripartite contract? Elena quickly cut in, her voice pleading. "Julian, let's just get the official loan approval process today. We can sign the side agreement privately right after we leave the branch, okay?" I stared at her in total silence. Under my steady, unblinking gaze, her confidence withered, her voice dropping to a fragile whisper. "Just this once, please." I set my pen down onto the mahogany surface and slid it into the center of the table. "In that case, today's meeting is concluded." The loan officer looked up in shock. "Mr. Julian, what does that mean?" "It means I formally withdraw all personal authorization and explicitly refuse to act as a co-borrower or guarantor." I stood up, leaving every unsigned document behind, turned around, and walked out of the suite. Elena chased after me, grabbing my coat sleeve in the crowded banking lobby. "Are you insane? Do you have any idea how walking out like this ruins our credit assessment profile?" I stopped, turned, and looked down at her. "The only people whose profiles are affected are yours and Marcus's, not mine." Her face flushed with furious resentment. "You genuinely cannot stand to see Marcus succeed in life, can you?" I let out a cold laugh and nodded. "You're entirely right. I cannot stand the thought of taking on catastrophic financial risk for him." "Is that the precise answer you were looking for?" Her eyes went bloodshot with rage, her voice shaking violently. "Julian, you were never this kind of man before." "You're right." I smiled faintly. "Before, I was an idiot." Leaving her standing in the lobby, I walked down the stone steps and got directly into my vehicle. Chapter 10. The Class Reunion Confrontation. That night, Elena rushed over to my apartment building. When I opened the front door, her face was streaked with running mascara. "Can you stop pushing everything to such absolute extremes?" she demanded. I stepped back into the entryway. "You may come inside to speak, but do not shout in the hallway." She stood in the middle of my living room, clutching a crumpled printout of Marcus's rejected bank application. "Marcus was treated like a potential fraudster at the branch today. Do you have any comprehension of how utterly humiliating that was for him?" I looked at her calmly. "Have you ever once cared when I was humiliated?" She froze. "Does that even matter right now?" "Yes," I replied, "because now you finally understand what public embarrassment feels like." She gritted her teeth in fury. "I truly misjudged the kind of person you are. The feeling is entirely mutual." Shaking with uncontainable anger, she finally spat out the bitter truth she had harbored for years. "Marcus has always treated me with respect and kindness. Helping him build his life is the right thing to do. You can't even begin to compare to him. The entire living room plunged into absolute silence. I looked at her for several long seconds, then slowly nodded. I know. Realizing she had crossed an irreparable line, she immediately attempted to backtrack, her voice faltering. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant that you two are different types of people. You don't need to explain, I interrupted calmly. I walked over to the front door and pulled it wide open. Elena, effective immediately, you are never to set foot in this apartment again. I will keep your phone number saved solely for settling remaining financial accounting. Nothing else. She stood motionless. Are you going to block me? No, I replied. Blocking someone is an emotional reaction. I prefer to maintain clear evidence, strict boundaries, and total distance. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Does it really have to end like this? Yes, it does. She walked out into the corridor and turned back, her voice barely audible. Julian, is it truly completely over between us? I closed the door without answering. I walked back into the living room, picked up the damp, crumpled tissues she had left on the coffee table, and threw them directly into the trash bin. I assumed that would mark the final chapter of our interactions. But on Saturday evening, I attended an alumni dinner with former university classmates. As I reached the private dining room, the door was slightly ajar. Inside, I heard Elena's voice boasting to the table. Julian has already formally agreed to back Marcus's home financing. The mortgage approval will be finalized within the week. The entire table erupted into impressed murmurs and congratulations, while Marcus sat beside her with a smug, self-satisfied grin. I stood in the doorway, lifted my hand, and tapped firmly on the wooden frame. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at me. I walked calmly to the center of the table, set my phone down, and spoke in a clear, measured voice. Allow me to clarify 3 distinct facts for everyone present. First, Elena and I are permanently broken up and have not reconciled. Second, I will not be acting as a co-borrower, guarantor, or financial backer for Marcus under any circumstances. Third, the $128,000 that Elena unauthorizedly withdrew from our joint savings account must be fully returned to my personal account within 3 business days. If it is overdue by even 1 hour, I will formally file a criminal report for theft with the police department. The entire banquet room froze into stunned, breathless silence, broken only by the low hum of the air conditioner. Elena's face turned completely white. What are you talking about? I only borrowed that money temporarily. I looked directly at her. Is there a signed loan agreement? Did I ever give written consent for that transfer? She opened her mouth, but not a single sound emerged. Years ago, I had given her an auxiliary card linked to that account for household expenses and had neglected to cancel it after the split. Marcus stood up, attempting to play the role of peacemaker. Julian, we're all old classmates here. There's no need to make things so rigid and dramatic. I gave a cold smile. You're entirely right, which is why moving forward, we will operate strictly by criminal and financial law, not personal friendships. I picked up my phone from the table, turned around, and walked out of the restaurant. Behind me, Elena's muffled sobs broke out. Julian, do you really have to destroy my reputation in public? I did not pause, nor did I look back. Later that night, 2 notifications appeared on my phone simultaneously. Elena sent a 60-second voice note. Serafina sent a concise, single-line message. The institutional funding tranche has officially cleared underwriting. Final contract signing is set for Monday at 10 a.m. Congratulations, partner. I had recruited Serafina away from her restaurant and cafe shifts to join our startup full-time. A woman of her sharp organizational talent and legal clarity belonged in executive operations. I looked at the notifications, opened Serafina's message first, and replied, Received. See you Monday at 10. I set the phone down and went to the kitchen to boil water, leaving Elena's voice note unplayed. I only listened to Elena's message the following morning. The first 20 seconds were nothing but frantic sobbing, followed by broken, desperate pleas. Julian, I liquidated everything and transferred the full $128,000 back to your account. Please don't go to the police. I know I was wrong. I didn't mean to steal from you. Please just text me back and confirm you received it. I'm begging you. I listened to the end, locked my screen, washed my face, dressed in my suit, and left for the office. It wasn't that I had become cruel. It was simply that I had finally learned a vital life lesson. When someone else creates their own chaos, you must never carry the burden of their emotions. Chapter 11. The Dull Blade of Indifference. The contract signing on Monday morning concluded flawlessly. Halfway through our post-signing executive debrief, my assistant stepped into the boardroom and handed me a handwritten slip of paper. Mr. Julian, there is a woman downstairs in the lobby requesting to see you. Her name is Elena. She promises she only needs 3 minutes of your time. I checked my watch and nodded. Tell her to wait in the seating area. After the meeting adjourned, I took the elevator down to the ground floor. Elena was waiting in a corner of the glass lobby, clutching a designer bakery bag. The moment I walked over, she extended the bag with both hands. This is the specialty crepe cake you used to love. I stood in line for over an hour to get it fresh. I didn't reach for the bag. If you have something business-related to say, say it. Her hands froze awkwardly in midair before she slowly lowered the bag, her eyes reddening. I've already repaid every cent of the $128,000 back into your account. I fixed all the banking records too. Did you check? I saw the deposit notification. Then, are you still angry with me? I looked at her with total equanimity. Elena, I stopped being angry a very long time ago. She blinked, a faint glimmer of hope appearing on her face. Isn't that a positive sign? It is, I nodded. Because no longer feeling anger simply means I no longer care about you at all. Those words landed like a blunt blade, cutting deeply into her composure. Her complexion turned instantly ashen. Julian, I genuinely understand everything now. I pushed things too far. I took you for granted because I assumed you would always be standing there waiting for me. You see, I interrupted calmly. You said it yourself. You assumed I would always tolerate being secondary. That was the fundamental flaw. She hung her head, silent tears dripping down onto the bakery bag. Is there really no chance left for us? None. You won't even consider trying again? I already tried for 4 continuous years, I said, looking at her one last time. 4 years was more than enough. She stood frozen on the marble floor, as if all life and energy had been drained from her body. As I turned to walk toward the elevators, her trembling voice called out behind me. Julian, did you stop loving me a long time ago? I paused for 2 seconds. I didn't turn around. I stepped into the elevator. The automated glass doors closed between us, and she did not follow. Chapter 12. The Unmasked Truth. 2 weeks later, Marcus called my phone. I intended to reject the call, but accidentally tapped the screen and answered. Julian, can we meet up for 5 minutes? I want to formally apologize for everything that went down. That is entirely unnecessary. Please, man, just 5 minutes. I'm at the coffee shop directly across the street from your office tower. I hung up immediately. 5 minutes later, Marcus sent a photo over text. Elena was sitting across from him in the cafe, her face visibly swollen from crying. Accompanying the photo was a text message. If you refuse to come, she's going to keep blaming me for the breakup. Can you really sit back and live with that on your conscience? I stared at the screen and let out a cold laugh. Even at the very end of the line, he was still attempting to use another person as an emotional bargaining chip. I decided to cross the street. I wanted to bring the final curtain down on this farce myself. When I pushed open the cafe door, Elena's eyes illuminated with instant hope. Julian, you came. Before she could say another word, Marcus spoke up, adopting an air of mature reasonableness. Julian, I just want to say my piece. Maybe I handled a few minor details poorly, but the two of you ending up broken up cannot be pinned entirely on me. We're all grown adults here. Everyone makes their own personal choices in life. Without saying a single word in reply, I pulled my phone from my pocket, set it face up on the table, and tapped play on an audio recording file. It was a voice memo Marcus had sent to a mutual acquaintance while heavily intoxicated weeks earlier. His slurred, arrogant voice rang out with pristine clarity. Elena is the absolute easiest woman to manipulate. You give her a tiny bit of emotional validation and validation drama, and she'll hand over her savings without hesitation. And reliable, honest guys like Julian are the most useful tools of all. Piggybacking on his clean financial statements and credit history is 10 times cheaper than paying fees to a commercial guarantee agency. The moment the audio clip finished playing, the entire table dropped into horrifying silence. Marcus's face turned completely gray. Where did you get that recording? The source is irrelevant, I replied, looking directly at him. The truth of the content is all that matters. Elena's hands began to shake uncontrollably. She turned slowly toward Marcus, her voice cracking in pure horror. Is that true? Is that what you think of me? Marcus panicked, frantically waving his hands. Elena, listen to me. I was completely wasted that night. I was just talking nonsense to show off. Elena violently shoved her coffee cup away, sending dark liquid splashing across the table. She stood up, screaming through tears. "Shut up! Shut your mouth!" She whipped around toward me, tears streaming relentlessly down her face. "Julian, I was so wrong. I was completely blind." I looked at her with detached serenity. "Your life is yours to clean up. I came here today solely to deliver the objective truth to you, not to deliver myself back into your hands." I stood up from the booth and walked toward the exit. As I reached the door, her broken, hysterical voice echoed across the cafe. "Julian, I swear I know I was wrong. Please." I paused for half a second by the doorway. I still did not look back. "Knowing you were wrong is enough," I said quietly. "But not every mistake comes with a second chance." Chapter 13. Genuine Care. Toward the end of that year, our software platform went live across enterprise clients. Our core engineering and operations team pulled 3 consecutive 36-hour shifts. At 1 a.m., I stepped out of the server room and found Serafina still sitting at her workstation, fine-tuning user interface designs. 2 steaming bowls of takeout wonton soup sat on her desk. I walked over. "You're still here?" Without lifting her eyes from the screen, she replied, "You haven't left either." "Whose soup did you think this was?" "Yours and mine." She pushed one bowl toward me. "Eat it while it's hot. Don't go upsetting your stomach lining again." I picked up a spoon and looked at her. "How did you even know my stomach was bothering me?" She finally looked up, a faint, observant smile playing in her eyes. "Whenever you're under extreme stress, your right hand unconsciously presses against your upper abdomen. Did you really think nobody in the office would notice?" I paused and smiled down at the bowl. "Very observant. I have no choice. I'm your director of operations. Noticing details is my job." I took a sip of the warm broth. The heat traveled down my throat, immediately easing the tension in my chest. She watched me eat, then asked gently, "Have you been struggling with insomnia again lately?" "Not particularly." "Lying again." She reached in her drawer and placed a small bottle of melatonin on my desk. "Stop overworking yourself. Also, you are forbidden from working overtime this coming weekend. I already booked you an appointment with a physical therapy specialist." I raised an eyebrow playfully. "Director Serafina, is this classified as corporate employee welfare or personal care?" A light blush dusted the tips of her ears, though her voice remained professional. "That depends entirely on your behavior." I smiled. "Then I shall make sure to perform exceptionally." "Starting how?" "First, by driving you safely home, and then coming back to the office to finish the deployment plan." She rolled her eyes with an exasperated laugh. "Are you out of your mind? Commuting back and forth across the city at 2 in the morning? In that case, I won't come back. I'll just drive you home and go straight to sleep. Even worse, we have client testing at 9 tomorrow morning." She chuckled, tapping the edge of her soup bowl with her spoon. "All right, enough banter. Eat your soup." When we eventually began dating, there were no dramatic declarations or grand, theatrical gestures. One crisp autumn afternoon, I waited for her outside her apartment building. When she came down the steps, her first words were, "Look at that. You're actually wearing a proper winter coat today instead of that thin jacket." "I was too terrified of getting another lecture from you," I teased, holding up a thermal flask. "I even brought freshly brewed ginger tea." She took the flask with a soft smile. "Excellent. You might actually live a long life." "Is that a blessing or a threat?" "Both." We walked down the tree-lined street side by side. The autumn breeze was chilly, but our clasped hands were warm. Chapter 14. Dignified Closure. 1 year later, Serafina and I celebrated our formal engagement banquet, surrounded by family, colleagues, and close friends. As we stood hand in hand on the floral stage, the master of ceremonies announced into the microphone, "Will the bride and groom please exchange their rings?" A slight murmur arose near the entrance of the banquet hall. I glanced up toward the doorway. Elena was standing quietly at the very back of the room, behind the crowd. She wasn't causing a scene, nor was she shouting. She was simply standing alone in the shadows, watching the stage with red, tear-filled eyes. Serafina gently squeezed my fingers, looked up at me, and whispered softly, "Would you like to step down and say hello to her?" I looked into Serafina's clear, trusting eyes for a few seconds, then gently shook my head. "There is no need." "Are you completely sure?" "Yes." There was no lingering hatred in my heart, nor was there any fear or bitterness. I had simply come to understand the ultimate truth. The most dignified and respectful closure one can grant to a failed past relationship is to never interfere with it again. I turned my attention entirely back to Serafina, took the polished ring from the velvet box, and slid it onto her finger. She slipped my ring onto my hand, looked up at me with a radiant smile, and whispered, "Julian, please take good care of me for the rest of our lives." I smiled back warmly. "Director Serafina, I look forward to our lifelong partnership." The entire banquet hall erupted into thunderous applause and cheers. Serafina blushed, nudging my shoe lightly with her heel. "Can't you say something romantic for once, instead of talking like we're in a board meeting?" I leaned down close to her ear and murmured, "Then let me put it another way. What? From this day forward, you never need to ask if I want help blowing out the candles. I want to celebrate every single birthday of my life with you." She paused for a brief moment, her eyes curving into a bright, beautiful crescent. "It's a deal." I held her hand tightly as the bright stage lights illuminated the room around us. This time I didn't look back, and I never needed to again. Chapter 15. The Warmth of Home. 2 years after our wedding, on a quiet Friday evening in late autumn, the city was draped in a gentle rain. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of our apartment, looking down at the steady stream of car lights reflecting across wet asphalt. The smell of slow-simmered beef stew and fresh herbs drifted from our kitchen, filling the home with a rich, grounding warmth. Serafina walked out of the kitchen carrying a small porcelain dish, wearing a light knit sweater with her hair pinned up casually. "Taste this," she said, lifting a wooden tasting spoon to my lips. "Too salty? Or just right?" I took a sip and smiled. "Just right. Perfect, actually." She gave a satisfied nod, setting the spoon aside. "Good. Because if you said it needed more salt, I was going to tell you the doctor said to watch your sodium." "You always have an angle, Director Serafina." "Lifelong operations manager," she countered with a grin, adjusting the collar of my shirt. "Someone has to keep our household running on optimal parameters." On the dining table sat a small, custom-made bakery box. Inside was a modest cake topped with fresh figs and dark chocolate shavings, with 2 neatly placed number candles. 31. There were no delayed text messages, no urgent emergencies from third parties, and no cold plates left untouched on a lonely restaurant table. Instead, the table was set for 2, complete with warm plates, cloth napkins, and a small vase of fresh white lilies. "Ready?" Serafina asked, bringing over a box of matches. "Ready," I replied. She struck a match and carefully lit the 2 candles. The tiny golden flames flickered steadily, casting a gentle glow across her face. "No rush this time," she whispered, looking up at me with soft, steady eyes. "Make a real wish first." I looked at the flames, and then at the woman standing beside me. The person who had stood by me through late-night office grinds, celebrated every quiet milestone, and offered unwavering respect and warmth without ever demanding that I earn my place. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the empty ache of hoping for someone to show up. Everything I needed was already right in front of me. I closed my eyes, made a silent wish of gratitude, and opened them. "Blow them out with me," I said, taking her hand. "Together," she agreed. We leaned forward and blew out the candles together. The smoke curled softly into the warm air as the room settled into quiet comfort. Serafina reached up, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and pulled me into a gentle embrace. "Happy birthday, Julian." "Thank you, Serafina," I whispered, holding her close against my chest. Outside, the cold rain continued to fall against the glass pane, but inside, the lights were bright, the food was hot, and our home was entirely whole.